Okay, we are starting a new unit, and this unit is going to be on scatter plots. So for this lesson, the essential learning is that you're going to be able to read and use a scatter plot to obtain information. So a scatter plot is a type of graph. It says this is a scatter plot. So if we go over and look at this graph, I can see the title up here says driver's age versus the distance to read a sign. Then if I look at my graph, I can see on the x-axis I have the driver's age. So it's a set of numbers. These are their ages, 15, 25, 35, so it looks like it's going up by tens. And then on the y-axis, I have the maximum distance it took them to be able to read a sign. And it looks like it's going by hundreds here. And then I have all of these points in here. Each of these points represents a person whose age and distance to read a sign was recorded. So for example, this point right here, this person was probably about 66 years old, and the max distance they could read the sign was about 300 feet. So each of these individual points is a result from both sets of data. Now, a scatter plot has ordered pairs that can show the relationship between two data sets. So each point represents an ordered pair. For example, if I pick out this point right here, I can see that this point, the driver's age is about 75 years old if I follow that down to the x-axis, and the max distance, if I follow it over, is about 460, I'm going to say, because it looks a little bit more than halfway. So the ordered pair of this point would be 75, 460. 75 represents their age, and 460 represents the feet that they could see for the distance. One thing that's really important that you notice about scatter plots is that scatter plots are made with ordered pairs from sets of data that are only numbers. So driver's age and distance to read a sign, those of them are both numbers. We cannot plot things like favorite pizza, favorite color, anything that's not a number cannot be plotted in a scatter plot. And we need two sets of data. So because we need two sets of data, we could not just plot driver's age. That would create a line plot instead of a scatter plot. So you need two sets of data so that you can compare to see if there's a relationship. Okay, now it's important you know how to make a scatter plot. If we were in the classroom, we would be making a lot of scatter plots on graph paper by hand. But because we're doing things a little bit differently, we're going to focus on parts of scatter plots and meanings, but also knowing how to create a scatter plot is important. So the paragraph up here says the data in the table below represents the number of hours that students spent practicing reciting the Gettysburg Address and the percentage they scored for their grade when reciting it in class. So I can see I have a table of data, I have hours practice, and the percentage that was scored. So this would be like their grade out of 100%. Now, when I create a scatter plot, I need to look at the independent and the dependent variable, so the x and the y variable. Our hours practice is independent because that's what we do to get out the dependent, which is the percentage scored. So hours practice is going to go on the x-axis, and percentage scored is going to go on the y-axis up and down. Now, normally your graph wouldn't have the units already on it, so I'm going to quickly show you where these units came from. If you notice our hours practice, the lowest number is 0 and the highest number is 6. So I had to get all the way from 0 through 6 on here, so I just went by ones and I started at 0. Then for percentage scored, I can see that my lowest score is 55 and the highest score is 100. So I had to get from 55 to 100 on the graph, so I had a break in the graph. At my first line, I started at 50 and then I went up by tens. So I'm going to label the x-axis as the hours practiced. I'm going to label the y-axis as percentage scored. Okay, and then it's time to plot our points. So when we plot our points, we look at our ordered pairs, 384. So that means over 3 for hours practiced. So I'm going to graph this ordered pair here. So I'll go over 3 and up to 84 and put a point. About there, and it's just an estimate. Then the next one I'm going to graph is 283. So I'll go over 2 and up to 83, put a point. Then 592. So I will start with by going over to 5 hours and a score of 92, just an estimate. Next one is 170. So over 1 up to 70. 060. Right on the y-axis there. 490 over 4 up to 90. 375 over 3 up to 75. You have to estimate it's in between 70 and 80. 100. 455 over 4 up to 55. And the last one is 695. So over 6 up to 95. And then we have all of our points on the scatter plot. Okay, then the last thing we have to do for our scatter plot is to put a title on it. So this graph was about the Gettysburg Address and their scores. So my title is going to be the Gettysburg Address scores. Your title should be something related to what your data is about. And then we're just going to look at the different parts of the scatter plot. So we know we have the x-axis, the horizontal axis, and the y-axis, the vertical axis, which I've labeled those as hours practice and percent scored. The next thing we have is an outlier. So if you notice how this data kind of trends upward, all of these data points kind of flow upwards like this, except for this one way down here. So unfortunately, this is an outlier. This poor student studied for 4 hours and they still only scored a 55 on the test. So there's lots of different reasons that could be, but we call that an outlier when it doesn't follow the flow of data and like the pattern or the trend of what's going on. It kind of is set apart from the other ones. So we have an outlier right here. And then line of fit, we're going to save that for next week. So we're not going over the line of fit today. Now we're going to use a scatter plot to look for some information here. So it says the scatter plot at the left shows the amount of fat in grams and the number of calories in 12 restaurant sandwiches. So the scatter plot's down here. You can see grams of fat on the x-axis, calories on the y-axis, and each of these points represents one of those sandwiches. So question A, how many calories are in the sandwich that contains 17 grams of fat? So we look for the fat. Fat is on the x-axis, and 17 is between 15 and 20. So I'm going to go up and look for a point between 15 and 20, and it looks like it's right there. So I'm going to follow that over, stay on the line, and it looks like it's about 400 calories. Question B, how many grams of fat are in the sandwich that contains 600 calories? So I'm going to go on the calories on the y-axis up to 600 and over. Now if I look here, I have 600 right on the line, and then I have one a little bit above 600, so make sure you choose the right one. The 600 one is right here, and then when I follow that down, looks like it is 30 grams of fat. Okay, next one. Maggie made the scatter plot below to record the distances she jumped with different running start lengths. So we can see her long jump distances on the x-axis, the length of her running start, so how far she ran before she jumped. The y-axis, the distance of the long jump, so from when she took off the ground to where she landed. Question A says, when her long jump distance was 7 feet, what was the length of her running start? So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to figure that out. Okay, and then looking at the answer for A. So if her long jump distance was 7 feet, I'm going to go on the y-axis to 7 feet and over. I can see that's this point right here. right there. And so then if I go down, I can see that the length of her running start was 30 feet. Question B, when her length of her running start was 45 feet, what was her long jump distance? So go ahead and figure out B. And the answer for B, if you go for her running start about 45 feet, it's in between 40 and 50. So that is this point right here. Then when we go over, it's about 7.5 feet. Okay, I just wanted to point out one thing. So the next step on your checklist, you're going to do a Khan Academy practice set. I want to make sure you can see how it works. So when you get to the practice set, you're going to be plotting some points on a scatter plot. And so the table will be above and it says plot the data in the scatter plot. You just click to add points. So your screen will say click to add points. So you just click where you want to put a point. So for example, 6/6 over 6 sick days and up 6 t-shirts. You just click and it puts a point. And then so you just go ahead and put the points where you need them based on the data in the table. So these aren't the correct points, but I wanted to show you how to do that. You just click to plot your points.